All right, ladies and gents, and we are live for another week of crazy news, geopolitics, finance, economics, you name it, it is coming this week. So we're going to talk about, in this video, the next big distraction that I think is coming our way. But before we even get into all of that, we have to give context. We've got to talk about what happened over the weekend. I know on Saturday I made a video talking about China, Belarus, Russia and their military training and how they're getting ready for NATO, and they're now openly talking about it. But another thing I said on Saturday's video was about Biden. I said I don't think he's going to run, he's going to resign, Harris is going to... In fact, let me just grab that clip, because this always happens. People always say, how do you say it? And then the next day it happens on this, because people often... I see in the comments, Neil, do you think Trump's going to run against Biden, etc.? I don't think Biden is going to run in November against Trump. I think, and again, I know this is a long shot here and I'm really sort of projecting out, but I think what will happen is it will be Trump running against Kamala Harris. Why do I think that when there's... Anyway, so you get the idea. And then within what I think it was 12 hours later, the announcement came out about Biden's now stepping aside and now he's endorsing Kamala Harris. I mean, it's weird how these things always happen. It's just intuition a lot of the time, how I always come out with this stuff. But this is what we've now seen. We've seen, and here's the really weird thing about this. And I want to talk about also another really strange thing. You've got to stick around for what happened at the end of the Republican conference. I'm going to mention something here which is really weird. And we've also got a lot more going on about the investigation into the shooter and all sorts. So we're just going to do a round robin today and just sort of close out a lot of weird stuff that's happened recently. But there's massive infighting right now in the US, predominantly, let's say, in the Democratic Party. These guys are in meltdown right now because you've got Biden resigning. And when we say he resigned, I don't actually think he resigned. I really don't think he was the one that wrote that letter and posted it to... Everyone keeps saying he posted it to Twitter. Twitter is so gone. It's long gone now. It's X. Okay, so it was posted to X. And they said that it seemed as though he didn't even realize, because someone asked him a question and he's, I'm going to be fighting strong. And he's like, does he realize he just put out a letter? So it obviously wasn't him that put out the resignation letter. And apparently he's sick again. He's with his, 20th bout of COVID, whatever else. But at first he didn't even want to sort of endorse Harris. That's the thing. And you've seen all this infighting going on. And even Pelosi, Schumer, who else there? Obama, these people haven't endorsed, because you've got these two factions going on at the moment. It seems to be a lot of infighting from me watching the interviews and reading their sort of posts and things on X and everything else. It's probably because they're not 100% behind Harris. Although the donations are just flooding in now and she gets to keep all the donations that went in for Biden's campaign, because she's vice president, their same team. She gets to use all that as well. Do I think this is going to make a massive difference for November? Not really. I'm standing by what I said a couple of years ago now, and I keep repeating it. I do think Trump is going to win in November. I think he will win the presidency in November. You're going to see a lot of disruption. You're going to see a lot of stuff going on around that time, is what I still believe we're going to see. But one thing I found interesting in a lot of the reporting today, he's finally endorsed this. And by the way, their own team didn't know. They were still giving interviews this morning. Who is this lady, by the way? BlackRock head of iShares. Anyway, no comment on that. They were all giving interviews saying, oh yeah, he's going to crush Trump and all this other stuff. I don't think they even knew that he had resigned. And then this is what I found interesting. Lawmakers like Speaker Pelosi led the pressure campaign, but she was joined by an array of financial world figures. So all these financial people, big financiers, have been pushing this. They've all been pushing it. Why are they involved? You've got to ask. When it's political, why are they involved in all of this? So there was all these interviews going on. They've all been talking about Biden. Oh, you know, he's running, he's going to win. And they didn't even know themselves. Now, who is going to be her running mate? It's still up in the air. I've got a couple of theories on who I think it will be. I hope it isn't Gavin Newsom. Goodness me, can you imagine if he became VP or even president? That would, imagine California spreading to the rest of the US. Now, I wanted to show you, this is really interesting. Hold on, I've just got to get it ready for you. This one's really interesting. Actually, I've got it. It's right here. Okay. So before we talk about that, this is who Soros, they're all talking about Soros. It's been in Bloomberg today. Apparently, he was one of the guys that was pushing Biden to get rid of Biden. He's endorsed Kamala Harris. He's going to be putting up all this money, etc. Now, this is what happened. At the end of I don't know if you watched the Republican National Convention, but I watched a lot of it. I thought it was quite interesting to watch. Now, did you notice this at the end? Listen to this soundtrack.
I mean, we know the kind of campaign he ran in 2016. He was inaugurated as...
Okay, you probably didn't notice this because it's really weird sometimes, my brain. But I noticed this song. I was like, that's interesting. And my moderator of one of my communities as well, he messaged me about this. And because we just kind of noticed all these little weird things. This was at the end of a movie called The Sum of All Fears. You might remember that. Now, apparently, Trump picked this song himself. Whether that's true, I have no idea. There's no way to know. But apparently, he picked this song himself. So I had to find out, what is this song? I had to look it up. This is what it's called. Pavarotti sang it before. Here it is. Okay, very famous song. You've heard it before. Okay, so what happened when this was played at the end of The Sum of All Fears? It's called Payback. And you cannot make this stuff up. I mean, seriously, there it is. I've highlighted it there. You cannot make this stuff up. This was about the President of the United States being part of some conspiracy to kill him. And he finds out about there's a patsy, and then he finds out who it was. And then the closing scene, I'm serious. I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm saying this is weird, really weird. You know, I like to find all this weird stuff. And what happens then? Well, here it is. This is the closing scene. Okay, there's his competition. Well, we know what happens there, just as he's signing this new declaration. Yeah, here comes the guy behind him, and it's game over. And it's not just that. There's all these scenes right at the end, all the way through to this guy. Yeah, he gets the good news as well. I mean, all this stuff happened. And I've got to say, I thought that was really weird. So it then started, I looked into a couple of other things, because there was in terms of these investigations going on as well, there is one line of inquiry which is not being talked about. And it was the one that I mentioned. As soon as it happened, I said, this is a bit weird. I did that video. Some people were a bit funny about the video because, you know, obviously the shooting just happened. Everything's very sensitive. So I was being careful how I tread. But one thing I thought straight away was it reminded me of some of these campaigns. And, you know, I was in the military. I did a lot of interesting stuff. It reminded me of one of these campaigns where there's a lot of psychological stuff that goes on. And rather than me talk through it, because you'll think, okay, Neil, whatever, I thought I'd just show you something that shows you yourself. Now, did you ever see this on Darren Brown? It was called Man Steals £100,000. It was called The Heist. So Darren Brown is a illusionist, he's a hypnotist. So he took this guy, he's just a random guy, and he hypnotized him. And the guy didn't even realize he'd been hypnotized. So what does the guy do? He's been hypnotized into robbing an armed vehicle. Here it is. And then you'll hear the key in a second. There it is. There's the key. Okay, so what happened? He's just heard the music. Now he's been triggered. So he's been activated, basically. What does he do? He goes past the... Ready for this?
Excuse me, mate.
Okay, I can't actually show it. I forgot there was a gun in the scene because this video will get banned. But anyway, he robs the guy. Oh gosh, there's so much guns in this scene. Okay, and then he runs off. Okay, and then they all come.
Danny.
Well done. Just a...
Okay, and then he deactivates it. He wakes him up. Okay, so this is one line of inquiry that's being looked at now. And it might seem a little bit strange, that line, but it actually, sorry, let me turn all these things off the things here. But this is one thing that's being looked at now. A very unusual thing, but I don't think it's out of the question for something like this to be the case as well. So the other thing I want to talk about is these next distractions that are coming up at the moment. And the next distraction, I've been really paying attention to this. So this was Antony Blinken, and he's been talking about Iran. He did this interview, and he talked about Iran. I'll just grab the some of the dialogue of what he said. He said, "Where we are now is not in a good place. Iran, because the nuclear agreement was thrown out, instead of being at least a year away from having the breakout capacity of producing the material for nuclear weapons, is now probably 1 or 2 weeks away from doing that. They haven't produced a weapon itself, but that's something, of course, that we track very, very carefully. And you put those two things together, the fissile material and explosive device, and you have a nuclear weapon. So we're focused on that. What we've seen in the last weeks and month is Iran is actually moving forward with this program. So we've got this going on as well now. And I think this is probably going to be one of the next big things, next big distractions, because you keep hearing about Iran all the time. And I've been talking about Iran for the last year now, which I think is going to be one of the next fronts, especially if things end in Russia-Ukraine, which I don't think will end for a while yet. But I think when that does finally end, you've got all this massive ramped up military that they've been building, and they are building, and they're ramping up weapon manufacturing facilities. And they know now, well, they've always known this, but they know that when you actually ramp up all these facilities, it adds to the GDP, and it can pull, let me put it this way, think of what pulled America out of the Great Depression, some of the other countries. What was it? It was war. That is what pulled them out of the Great Depression. And I don't even see how this is debatable. I sometimes see people debating it. It went on for a long, long time, 1929 through to 1938 sort of era, that sort of period. What pulled them out? It was the war. It was all of that, because all this ramping up. And America then, a little history lesson, that's how they got all the gold, because European countries, a lot of other countries, were paying America for not just weapons, but there was food and there was all sorts of other things. America became the factory of the world, which China's now the factory of the world. So I just don't see this all going away. Once they ramp up and they see the GDP growing, I think they'll need another front. And that's why I keep bringing up Iran, because I've just got this, again, intuition. I've got this funny feeling something is going to happen next, and I don't know when it will happen. It might not be soon, it could be in the future, but I just think something's going to happen with Iran next. That seems to be the big one. And I keep seeing all these little clues all the time, like Secretary of, Blinken and all this other stuff now coming out and saying these things. He doesn't actually mention the fact that who released all the funds back to Iran in the first place. He was one of the advisors on that in the first place. And now he's coming out and saying, oh, look what they're doing. Yeah, you just released all the... Anyway. One other thing I wanted to mention was Microsoft. So we had the world's biggest outage last week, and Microsoft has now come out and they have blamed the European Union for allowing this to happen, because they said they couldn't bypass these rules. They said the European Commission deal prevented the software giant from making security changes that would have blocked the CrowdStrike update. So if you want to read it, there's a story, you can find it on the Telegraph all about it. But that is another big one that's happened this week. So we've kind of got a little more clarification on what happened there with the big outage. But that doesn't really explain everything. Microsoft is blaming now they're blaming the EU. Well, sure, they can take some blame, the EU, but they can't take all the blame for what happened in the first place. And I wonder if it's in this article. I thought it was interesting. One thing I thought straight away was Apple. Yeah, here it is. Was that Apple will take advantage of this, and it looks like they have. So in contrast, Apple actually blocked access to the kernel on its Mac computers in 2020, which it said would improve security and reliability. So they've said that, they didn't, well, it was a different operating system anyway. They don't even mention that, but they've said that they're now gaining a lot of customers coming across to use the OS operating system because they don't have these same security issues. And this is still going on, by the way. This outage, most things are back online, but there's still some systems that are down, and because some of them are really complicated. I won't go into it all. Some of them are really complicated to restore it all. I was like reading some of the stuff being sent out. I was like, yeah, most people are not going to know how to do this. They're going to need someone to do it for them, or remote, or whatever. But the other thing is, the knock-on effects of this is going to go on for a long, long time. They still haven't caught up with some of the cancelled flights, and some of the delayed flights finally got off, but there's still a knock-on effect. It's still going on today. And the NHS National Health Service, the GPs are still complaining that, yes, they've got access to patient records again, but now it's caused tons of work for them. And some of them have said it's going to take weeks to actually catch up with all of the lost time. And they said they were under huge amounts of pressure anyway. So this is going on for a long, long time yet. And it just sort of re-emphasizes what we talked about before. And that is that if you think about this central bank digital currency that they want to launch, if this is what's happened just from these sectors here, what on earth is going to happen if there's ever a massive cyber outage or cyber attack on the currency when they launch it? Or even the grid, because they want to have AI systems in the future manage all the energy. You should see these plans. I haven't talked about this yet, but some of these energy plans that the AI is going to manage it all for optimal efficiency throughout the energy grids. You imagine if that goes off as well, and they've got all the... anyway, we'll go into it another time. It's just pretty wild. But there's your little round robin for today. Thanks everyone for enrolling in the new program and the new course. I hope you are enjoying it so far, getting lots of amazing feedback. So thank you so much. Keep the feedback coming. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. God bless. And we'll chat again tomorrow.